My name is Pavan Sukhdev, and I'm here to speak with you about valuing nature and living within its boundaries. By background, I'm a banker, an economist, and an environmentalist. And today I'm the founder and chief executive of a company called Just Impact, which measures the impacts on nature and on the economy of companies and reports them to investors and, of course, to their own executives. I was a decade ago the study leader of a project called TEEB, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, as well as the lead author of the United Nations report called Towards a Green Economy. During my time, I have served on the boards of WWF International, of Conservation International, of the Global Reporting Initiative, the Stockholm Resilience Center. And I'm here to discuss with you what is actually a key concern, which is the speed and the severity of the decline in nature that we are seeing around us, and the role of economics and today's economy and today's economic model in causing it, and some of the solutions that are available to us if we get our act together and if we collaborate fearlessly towards what is clearly a pressing problem for us and for future generations, which is the decline in nature, the loss of biodiversity, and the degradation of ecosystems. So here is an amazing ecosystem. As some of you would recognize, this is the Amazonian rainforest, which is not just a store of nature, of species, but it's also a massive carbon store. But what people don't probably realize, it is actually one of the amazing rainfall factories of this planet. So here's what I mean when I say rainfall factory. This is a video simulation by the NCAR from the United States of the global rainfall cycle. And in it, you can see three massive rainfall factories: the Brazilian rainforest, the Amazonian rainforest, sub-Saharan Africa, and the Indonesian archipelago. And there you will see the white clouds, which is cloud formations, precipitating, and that's when you see the orange. And you can see that if you focus on Brazil for a moment, you will see that there is a diurnal or a daily massive beating hearts around the world of the global rainfall cycle. In this instance, it is the northeastern trade winds from the Atlantic, which collect something like 20 billion tons of water vapor, evapotranspiration, from the Amazon rainforest. And as it goes up the Andes, it condenses and it precipitates on the plains of the La Plata Basin, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina. And you can see this rainfall cycle being driven by these three massive, giant rainfall factories. On the right-hand side, the Indonesian archipelago; in the middle, the sub-Saharan African rainforest; and on the left, the ultimate king, the global capital of natural capital, which is the Amazon rainforest. Now, the question that we should ask is, for this amazing service that the northeastern trade winds, and in particular the rainforests of Amazonia, are providing to the La Plata Basin granary, which is basically growing a lot of the food of the world, that area grows something like $250 billion worth of food every year. The question to ask is, how much are they, Uruguay, Paraguay, Mato Grosso in Brazil, Argentina, etc., how much are they actually paying the state of Amazonas for this irreplaceable service of providing rainfall? And the answer, my friends, is exactly zero. This is the problem that we are facing collectively, which is nature provides value, but we do not seem to reward the nature that provides value, or the custodians, or the countries where that nature lies, which provides so much value to the economy. The value that nature provides are known as ecosystem services. Natural capital is the present value, or the economic reflection, if you like, of biodiversity. It's calculated as the net present value of ecosystem services. And biodiversity is basically another word for nature. It's the living fabric of this planet. Its ecosystems, its species, and its genes. And you can see these laid out from the original report called TEEB I mentioned, the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. And you can see that each layer, be it ecosystems or species or genes, possesses diversity as well as quantity, the extent of ecosystems, the abundance of species, or the populations of genes. And each layer is responsible for delivering valuable ecosystem services to humanity. You can call them the gifts of Mother Nature, whether it is recreation, or water regulation, or carbon storage by the massive forests that we have just described, or whether it's the food, fiber, and fuel that is provided by the agriculture that is supported by these ecosystems, such as forests and wetlands, or whether it is the design inspiration that advertising professionals get when they use tigers and beautiful landscapes in their advertising, or whether it is the invaluable service of pollination, which is provided by the bees. Invaluable and truly important. But did a bee ever send you an invoice, pollination services for the month of October 2023? No, that's part of the problem. The economic invisibility of nature, providing these gifts in its bounty for free, but sadly, with us humans, not recognizing that value and therefore destroying it carelessly and in a way that is going to ultimately lead to a loss of life quality and of survival for our own future generations. So these different layers, whether it is ecosystem services at the ecosystem layer or the species layer or the genetic layer, are all under threat because of the economic model that we follow. We tend to price and trade and value things which are private goods, cars, houses, etc. We price them and we value them. You would never tear up a beautiful jacket or a cloth that you purchased from a shop, and you certainly wouldn't destroy your car, or for that matter, somebody else's car, and certainly not destroy your house, because you paid a price for it, because it's a private good. But the moment our mind switches to public goods, we somehow forget that there is value. It's just that there is no price. Such is the nature of public goods. By definition, they belong to everybody and they belong to nobody. You can be virtuous and you can recreate public goods, and some philanthropists would do that. They would pay money to recreate a forest. But they can't expect a profit from that because it's a public good. You can grow the rainforest and it will have evapotranspiration, it will cause clouds and they will rain. But you cannot tell the clouds where to rain. You can't tell them, please rain in my field because I planted the forest that generated you. No, that doesn't work. And this basic lack of understanding of the value that Mother Nature delivers, not being priceable, is one of the main reasons why we create all kinds of disastrous policies which result over time in the loss of nature. To put some numbers around this, well, if we continue to do what we are doing, we will be losing natural capital. In other words, we'll be losing value as a result of loss of ecosystem services of the order of 2.5 to 4 trillion natural capital every year. And this was one of the discoveries of the TEEB report suite. And another discovery was that a lot of this destruction is happening actually as a result of the externalities or the third-party costs of doing business as usual. Whether you are a oil company generating externalities due to the oil that you produce, which is consumed, or whether you are a marine fishery, which is subsidized by governments and is basically depleting fish stock. So the numbers here are huge and they have been researched. And the challenge here is that despite knowing this, we don't appear to be doing very much. And unfortunately, and this is some research that was done by PBL in the Netherlands, pulling together an indicator known as mean species abundance, MSA, the average amounts of, let's say, tigers and toads and ticks in the Bengal area, which you see out there on the slide. Let me just run with you a little slide story of this, what happens in 1970, 2000, 2010, 2030, 2050. You can see that the mean species abundance, which is the ratio of how much of the original volume and diversity of species is available today versus in the undisturbed state, which is, if you like, pre-industrial revolution. The decline is palpable. You can see what happens, and I'll run it again. You can see what's happening in India, China, and Europe, because these are the parts of the world we are seeing today, right? You're going from the range of the 70s and 80s into the range of the 25s and the 50s%. That is the size and scale of the problem that we are facing basically over the last 40 years, 1970 to 2010 and onwards towards, unfortunately, 2050. These effects are not just on nature, but they are actually on all kinds of other dimensions of nature, which is, as we have shown, the rate of loss of ecosystems and species. Species losses are measured in extinctions per million species per year. You can see from that little triangle on the left-hand side that we have burst our way past the safe operating space. The two concentric circles, which are in dotted lines, the dark black one and the gray one, represent the safe operating space across numerous boundaries, like species and land systems and fresh water and nitrogen and phosphorus pollutants and climate change and so on. And by the way, this calculation was as at 2015, so it's quite some time ago. If we look at the calculation more recently published in Science by Rockstrom and his colleagues, it's looking a lot worse. We have actually burst past not 3 planetary boundaries, which was the case in 2015, but actually 9 planetary boundaries. And that, my friends, is seriously worrying. This cannot continue, otherwise we are jeopardizing future generations. We need to look very quickly as to what is the cause of this problem and what we can do to fix it. And when we look at what is the cause of the problem, we find certain patterns emerging. We find that land use change is a key cause of this problem, causing extinctions and change in land systems and loss of forests. We find that excessive water usage, water abstraction is part of this problem. And that also relates to the water that is used for growing basically meat. And then we find that pollutants are a big part of the problem. Pollutants on land, pollutants in the air pollution, which also relates to, as you would have heard, 7 to 8 million deaths every year due to air pollution, human deaths. And then we find there are problems to do with waste, and waste can be in turn converted into either more emissions and more air pollution, or it can be converted to land pollution and so on. When we work out which are the sectors, and by the way, this calculation again was first done way back by Trucost and by the Natural Capital Coalition way back in 2013. And even before that, they had done an earlier version in 2010 for the UN Principles for Responsible Investment. So the knowledge has been sitting around. If we look at the top 3 contributors to this, the green boxes are greenhouse gas emissions, the red boxes are air pollution, the brown boxes are land use change. You will find that coal-fired power and coal-fired power, both in Eastern Asia and North America, and cattle ranching in South America, are the top 3. And then a bit below that, you will find wheat farming and rice farming by the conventional methods, not the sustainable methods that we advocate today, but the conventional forms of wheat and rice farming in Southern Asia. So these are the top 5 reasons why we have us hurtling past planetary boundaries. These are industries and issues which we can address because the means and the solutions already exist. There are alternative ways of generating energy. There are different ways of doing farming. Diets can and will be changed. And the nature of farming, going away from the intensive farming, input-based farming, into something which is nature positive and nature friendly, is already demonstrated. For example, in India, in Andhra Pradesh, through the natural farming initiative called APCNF, Andhra Pradesh Community Managed Natural Farming. All of these are possible, my friends. But the key thing is collective will, not just political will. It's also citizen will and business will. Politicians alone will not change this and cannot change this. Business has to drive it because business is the main driver, as you have seen, of the problems that we face on planetary boundaries. Those bars on the right represent the costs in economic terms, $450 billion, $316 billion in terms of power costs. The costs that we are seeing, the social costs, are driven by the business. The private sector is 2/3 of the economy, and that 2/3 of the economy is driving 2/3, roughly, of the impacts on planetary boundaries. So we need to pull together and try and achieve a global goal for nature, which is let's be nature positive by 2030. But it'll need businesses to drive this and change. It'll need citizens to put the pressure on them to change. And it'll need politicians to create the right policies, to eliminate perverse subsidies, and to support investments, public investments, in the right areas, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, and so on. These are the big elements of change that are required, but all of these are possible. Collectively, what is needed? According to various calculations, including my own team in the United Nations Environment Program more than 12 years ago, and more recently also Yuval Noah Harari, the famous author, it needs no more than 2% of global GDP to be invested in a different direction. My friends, this is not about charity. This is about investing differently, not investing in more fossil fuel, not investing in more unsustainable agriculture, but investing instead in renewable energies, in energy efficiency, in sustainable forestry and fisheries and farming, and so on. Just 2% change in the way global GDP is composed, which is actually quite significant because that is 10% of gross capital formation, in other words, of total investment. So 1/10 of total investment, which is no more than 2% of global GDP, changing the direction of that is what we need. That will deliver us a green and equitable economy of permanence. That will deliver us global goals for nature, which enable us to be nature positive by 2030. It is achievable. But my friends, we need to all be involved, all pull together in the same direction to achieve what is an equitable and safe future for our children, grandchildren, and generations to come. Thank you.